Welcome to Riverdale, the Drinking Game, the podcast, the only podcast hosted by two beautiful exotic hothouse flowers. I'm Joe Storms.
And I'm Meredith Laboon. And we're two high school friends turned 30 something drinking buddies, reliving one of our favorite shows while playing the drinking game that we made the first watch through. So, Joe, how are you doing this week? Are you excited to watch episode 2?
I am excited to watch episode two. I'm glad we were able to squeeze this in this week with me traveling and everything, but
Yes.
it's good that we were able to carve this time out. So with my traveling, I have a question for you. Uh, I flew to Georgia for my fiance's brother's wedding, and on my flight out, I flew out ahead of her for various logistical reasons, and I got upgraded to Comfort Plus on Delta, and I got upgraded to the
Wow.
middle seat. Okay,
Okay, did you have the middle
and
seat before your upgrade?
no. So that's a whole thing of in of itself. You can have an opinion on that. But
Yeah, it's not an
I was
upgrade.
in I was in a middle seat between a couple. Like
Okay.
like a husband and a wife were on both sides of me.
And neither
They
of them wanted to switch with you?
neither of them offered to switch or wanted to switch. And like so here's my thought on this. I think if you do this, you have to commit that you are not communicating with your significant other or flying companion for the duration of the flight. You have to act like you don't know each other for the entire flight because they were like passing drinks back and forth during the flight, like, and they
Oh
were occasionally
my
would
God.
like motion to each other or like whisper something to each other. And this is a flight this is like a 7 a.m. flight. So I am
Okay, so
trying,
first of all, no one has any business being awake on a 7 a.m. flight. Like, go to sleep. What is wrong
yeah,
with people? This is
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. It was, I mean, they weren't like that bad, but like in my incredibly tired state, having gotten up at 3 a.m. to this was the second leg of my flight. So having had to get up at 3 a.m. to get on a flight to then get on this flight, I was like not in any mood to deal with this. And the very idea that someone would do this, I feel like is wildly inconsiderate. I know people hate the middle seat, but I feel like you shouldn't make the middle seat worse for someone else. Like it's already the worst seat, you shouldn't make it even worse. That's my stance on it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, I don't know, do you feel more strongly about the middle seat than you do about like your spouse? Like
Apparently.
I would rather sit next to my spouse and take the middle seat, which I've literally done before. Like when that's happened to us, I've just been like, "Here, you pick. Like, do you want, the aisle?" Usually Sean, my husband, wants the aisle cuz he's tall. But like if it's
Mhm.
my aisle seat, I'm like, "Do you want the aisle or like do you want to switch with him and have the window?" Like, and we'll sit next to each other. And like especially if you're going to sleep on the flight because then you can kind of like rest your head on each other, and it's hard to sleep on a flight when you're in the middle seat between two strangers because you have to be like straight as a rail and not like lean one way or the other.
Yeah. So I was
But I guess they weren't sleeping anyway. They were like talking and like
yeah,
drinking.
well they were like watching movies and stuff too, but they would like like the at one point they like one of them was like thirsty and one of them like passed their Coke across the other person they drank it and then they passed it back. It was like the whole I feel like there's already enough disturbances on a flight without like adding and they were like, you know, like asking each other for like if they for headphones and things like that during the flight. It was just a I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's really annoying. I hate like, every flight is going to be mildly annoying for every single person on it, except for maybe like the people, no, even the people in first class, because they always like look at you with that judging glare when like the poors are getting on the plane. Like they'll like look at you from their little seat and like stare you down like you're so disgusting to go be like sitting in coach. But
I've flown
like
first class and done that for sure. Yeah.
I've never sat in first class, but I can only hope that I would do that. I have pretty
It's
good
great. That's
RBF,
why
so
they
I
let
think
you
I
out
would.
first.
Yeah, so that you can do that. It's part of the experience. So they're
Yeah.
mildly inconvenienced maybe at that time and that time only. Everybody else is going to experience like inevitable things like that through the duration of the flight. You know, a baby will cry. Like there's going to be stuff. But if you can avoid being an inconvenience to other people, like why wouldn't you? Like that's very avoidable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff where people have like strangely strong opinions on it, like like hating other people taking their shoes off, or uh uh like whether or not you should be feel like you should be able to recline your seat at all.
Yeah. Okay. That's controversial. And I want to know like, are you pro reclining the seat or anti reclining the seat?
I believe everyone should be able to recline their seat if they want. That said, I always feel like I'm going to be really impolite if I do it, so I almost never do it. Like I have to be really desperate. Like I did it on this flight because I was just like I need to get some sleep, and I reclined it against my my conscience's urgings not to.
I feel like we just all have to agree to recline it because I think everyone wants to recline it for the most part. And if
Hmm.
we all did, if every person reclined their seat at the same time, then we would maintain the same amount of space than if we hadn't reclined. And then we'd all get to recline. And like maybe we all put our seat back up at mealtime because it's kind of hard to eat on the tray if someone's seat is reclined in front of you. But then like after mealtime, the tray table goes up, or you just have a book on the tray table or, you know, movie or whatever. And then we all recline again.
I think there should be a button in the cockpit where once you're allowed to like, once it's safe to recline, because they always make you put it up for the thing, the like pilot pushes it and then all the seats decline in unison throughout the plane. And then you can put yours back up if you choose, but they'll all be forced into a reclined position uh
Yeah, there has to
at
be
a
an adult
certain moment
who's
in
going
the
to
flight.
decide that for us.
Yeah, it's like a light will turn on in the like above you on your console, and it'll be like the seat reclining light to warn you that it's about to happen. And
Yeah.
like it's like that. It's like the instructions for if there's an emergency. It's just part of every flight now.
Yeah, people would probably like it. Like, I think they would be grateful. I mean, somebody
Yeah.
would sue the airline because their like arm would get pinched in something when the seat's reclining and then it would be ruined for everyone.
Hmm.
But I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, but until that lawsuit happens,
I
imagine how
know, why
glorious
not?
that time will be. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, should we go downstairs to La Bonne Nuit and share what we're drinking? So, Joe, what are you drinking today?
So this week, because I've been gallivanting around the South, Georgia and northern Florida, I've got Sweetwater IPA in honor of our lovely
Yay!
river. I'm not feeling great about it.
Why?
Uh, it is an Atlanta-based brewery, and the Eagles are playing the Falcons tonight. So I think I'm gonna have to switch to Yingling after this.
Well, I appreciate the sacrifice you made to have the official beer of Riverdale for this.
Yes.
Which
I associate this beer most specifically with you with us being in cosplay at Dragon Con as Jason and Cheryl, and you uh like us being at like the YA dance party, and you just like running off to go buy me a Sweetwater beer. Buy
that
both of
you
us
did
Sweetwater beer.
not need because you were like, I mean, I think I was one rum bucket deep and you were maybe two rum buckets deep at this point of the con.
Yeah, the rum buckets they sneak up on you.
Yeah, you really don't expect to be drunk when you drink one of those things, and
Yeah.
it's a surprise
Well,
every time.
any cocktail that comes in a bucket, you know.
Yeah, I also have that association. I mean, it's funny because they do sell Sweetwater beer here in Philly, but I had never seen it or really thought about it before Dragon Con, so that's what I associate it with too. And just like seeing whatever little bar at the side of this party that we saw, and they had a beer called Sweetwater with like a picture of a river on
Hmm.
it. It's just like it's the official beer of Riverdale. It's so great.
Yeah. And that was the evening of our religious experience. So
Oh my god, that was the evening of okay, you have to tell that story now.
I think it's too long to tell. We'll get into it eventually, but we had a religious experience if your religion is Riverdale. And like honestly, explaining to this too much, I think would reveal too much about other stuff we've teased for the show.
Mm.
I think that's maybe part uh of explaining the golden rule of the show. Uh,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
'Cause it's gonna
Yeah.
spoil that. It's a fairly lengthy and confusing story that requires a lot of tangents and background explanation for it to make
Yeah, I
sense.
guess that's true. So sorry listeners, you're going to have to just get that little teaser. But
Yeah, it
what
also
I will
contains
say
a lot of
about
spoilers for the show.
it does, but the most important spoiler, which I mean, this will be like the carrot on the stick to keep listening to this dumb show, is you guys have not yet learned the most important rule of the Riverdale drinking game. And the religious experience we had at Dragon Con made us feel like that much more sure that this is like the keystone rule of this game. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And we'll explain it someday. Though it will be the rule. It's gotta come at the right episode because
Yeah.
it never actually comes up in the drinking game, unfortunately. Spoiler, but
I know,
it
but we'll have to
it
find like
is
the right moment. Yeah, we'll
yeah.
tell
There's
you
gonna
when
be
you're
an
older,
episode
listeners.
when you're old enough. Yeah. Um, what are you drinking this week, Meredith?
I'm drinking wine. So, one thing about me is that I am obsessed with Halloween. It's everything to me. It's now September, which means that we're already like more than halfway through the Halloween season. We're in like full swing of things. And I went to the grocery store and they had, those 19 crimes wines, which I feel like they used to have pictures of like old-timey criminals on it, and now I
Mhm.
feel like usually when I go to the store, I just see the Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg versions.
Mhm.
Um, but there are other criminals as well that they've featured. Um,
Other
but
than famous criminals Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart.
I mean, Martha Stewart is a famous criminal. Did Snoop Dogg actually ever like commit a crime, or are they just friends?
I'm sure he's illegally possessed marijuana at some point in his life,
No.
but
Can you imagine like you buy like the Snoop Dogg Chardonnay and you turn around the back of the label when it tells like their story of crime and it's like Snoop Dogg illegally
like
possessed
50
marijuana?
possession charges.
Okay, so we'll report back. No, we're not ever going to report back on this, but what was Snoop Dogg's crime, we'll never know. But for Halloween, instead of just doing Martha and Snoop, they did all the Universal monsters. So that was very exciting to me. So they had like Dracula, they have Frankenstein, and the one that I got is Bride of Frankenstein, and it's a red blend. And it's pretty good.
Are they all red blends or what about white
No,
wine?
they the Dracula one was, I think, a cab sav.
That's fine. So that's a red. If Dracula didn't
Yeah,
get a red, I'd be pissed.
I know. Can you imagine? And then Frankenstein was also red. They didn't have all of them at my store though, so
Okay.
they only had reds at my store, but there are probably others.
Listeners, go to your local liquor store or wine retailer and report back to us on the varietals.
All right, are you ready for a quick break before we get into the gospel?
Yes, let's take a break.
And now it's time for the gospel according to Roberto, chapter 2, A Touch of Evil. Jason Blossom's bloated, waterlogged body has been found by Kevin and Moose on the edge of Sweetwater River. Archie is racked with guilt about not coming forward with what he and Miss Grundy heard on the 4th of July, and he needs to talk to a friend, so he texts Betty only to find that she does not want to talk to him. So, with no other options, the only thing he can do is take a shirtless midnight run to Miss Grundy's house to talk it through, where she tells him again just not to confess and that they're both going to get in trouble. They're both going to go to jail in exactly the way that an adult would tell a child that they're victimizing.
Yeah, uh, this part, this is where Grundy starts to get real icky, like even
Mm-hmm.
ickier. Like there's, I think the show frames it in the first episode that it's like maybe like a little forbidden lovey, you know? It doesn't quite condemn it. It doesn't quite frame it in a way that's like condemning, but Grundy gets, I mean, like if you have like any kind of ability to understand the power dynamics at play here, it
Yeah.
seems real icky.
Yeah. It's not great, but I think it's good storytelling to have it done that way because even though Jughead is our off screen narrator, in the first episode. Now that he's like an actual character in the story as well, I feel like we get more of the storytelling from like how he sees things and his POV. Um so we get a little more of like a grounded approach to the Miss Grundy situation than just Archie being like, this lady is in love with me. And it's like, no, this is like an adult woman who's a predator.
Yeah. And it's also to the whole the I think this is related to the way the Archie is like almost is I'm increasingly thinking this is actually maybe what Roberto did deliberately, that Archie is just like a female lead's story arc grafted onto a male lead character, because this feels
Mm.
like something you would see in a uh and it's I maybe Roberto's a genius like in ways that we're not talking about. Like he's a genius in sort of like certain like aesthetic things he brings, and obviously he's a very successful showrunner with many successful and influential shows over the last like decade. But I think there's when the more I think about it, the more he's like this hits different because it's a male lead, even though it's like stuff that would I think typically be happening to a female lead. I'm running with this theory as long as I can. I think there's something to it.
Yeah, I think there's something to that too. Totally. So yeah, we get a lot of new perspectives this episode. Meanwhile, at the Cooper house, we learn a little bit more about Betty's family. We get some more other adults coming into the picture. So we see her dad for the first time. We learn a little bit more about her parents. Their names are Hal and Alice Cooper, which iconic that Betty's mom's name is Alice Cooper. And they are journalists, and they're a little too excited about the continuing investigation into Jason's murder. Like they're like, oh, we're going to be spending a lot of late nights out, and like they're covering the story, but also I think they kind of love watching the Blossoms suffer. um Alice just spends the entire episode giving Betty a hard time for having friends at school, talking about how much she hates the Blossom family, and later bribing the town mortician in small bills to give her the inside scoop on what they find in Jason Blossom's body during his autopsy. So, exciting episode for Alice. And we also meet some of the other town adults in the episode. We learn that Kevin's dad, Sheriff Keller, is leading the investigation into Jason's death. And we also meet Josie's mom, who's the mayor of Riverdale. Also related, but Hal looks exactly like this kid that we went to high school with. And like, I'm not going to give that person's name on the show, obviously, but just it's confusing to call him Hal because when we watched the show, we always referred to him by the name of this real life person that we know that looks like him.
I think that's the first time I've realized that his name is Hal. We started watching
Yeah,
this
it's
show in
weird.
2021.
I feel like, oh yeah, Hal, sure, okay.
Yeah. This is another thing where, in many ways, it feels like I'm watching the show for the first time. Because I remember it took me like a solid season and a half to realize that Betty's parents were reporters in Riverdale. Because we
Yeah, I mean,
mostly, on the first watch through, we mostly were like in a
drinking.
haze slash talking over the episode.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big theme throughout this entire show is like, have we sat in a room together and watched this entire show? Yeah, we have.
Yes,
But
Riverdale was on TV. Every minute of Riverdale was on a TV in a room that we were present for. But do we remember half of it?
no,
Maybe?
is there an episode that we just sat and watched without talking through the entire episode to completion? No. So
Only if one of us maybe fell asleep after too late at night. Maybe that was the only time.
yeah, so we're learning a lot here, people. It probably took us, halfway through the show to learn that Betty's parents were ever reporters. And here we are. We're learning it in
But
episode 2.
but also like Betty's mom doesn't do like a lot of like Betty and Jughead are like better uh as we'll find out better like journalists than spoiler better journalists than she is in that like you see that there are more scenes with them like investigating stories for their school newspaper, which will come up later.
Well, yeah, and the
That's not
school
much of a
newspaper
spoiler.
is the real newspaper of this
Yeah,
town.
yeah, like that's their New York Times, and the whatever the hell um, Alice and Hal are churning out is more like
It's the
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 New York
equivalent of a
Post.
school paper for adults.
Yeah,
Like the kids are
shots
running
fired.
this town. The high
Yeah,
school is the center of the universe. This is a spoiler as well for a later season, but one of my favorite parts of this show is later when we see a mayoral election and everybody goes to vote in the election, but they also have to vote in the same room at the same time for who's going to be class president.
yeah,
And I think that really sets the tone for like how Riverdale operates as a town.
yep.
So that's what's going on with the Coopers. After that, Betty basically says, like, oh no, I'm never going to be friends with Archie again to her mom. Like, you don't have to worry about that. And then she immediately walks to school with Archie. And they do make up, they talk it out, they agree to remain best friends, despite the fact that Betty does have feelings for him that are unrequited. And at school, Betty's called to the principal's office because a large delivery of yellow roses has arrived for her, and they are from Veronica. And Veronica also purchased cupcakes that she's got. She booked a mani-pedi, and she's prepared this like huge over-the-top apology for what happened with Archie during the spin the bottle situation. During this, Kevin compares Veronica to Madam Satan, which I find super interesting because I know you haven't watched Chilling Adventures of Sabrina yet, but Madam Satan is one of the main characters in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So that was very interesting to me. And Betty actually shocks them both by accepting Veronica's apology. So Veronica is over the moon. She's so grateful to be given another chance as a friend. She walks right out of that office still holding the cupcakes that she bought for Betty, which iconic. And Betty is actually like turns around and is a bit mean about this situation because Kevin's really surprised that Betty was so willing to forgive Veronica. And Betty says that it's like not that deep and that Veronica's going to forget all about her and find a new girl to torment in like 2 weeks, which I think is sad because like as the show goes on, at least when we watched it the first time, I did grow to be a little bit of a Veronica hater. But in these first episodes, I feel like she's like really trying to be a good person. And I really sympathize with her in a way that I didn't the first watch through. I think that Betty needs to be like seeing the effort that Veronica's putting into being her friend.
Yeah, and I think Veronica is an interesting character in that she basically from her early introduction, she's made this commitment that she wants to be a different person. She is making a change. She is leaving her old life behind and is trying to turn a new leaf in Riverdale. And you see that in the first few episodes where she's trying really hard to do right by Betty at every turn. And
Yeah.
the whole Archie in the closet thing, could it have gone differently? Could it have gone better? Sure. But at the same time, uh, as we'll see later in this episode, i- it's Betty being a little bit heartbroken and hurt over things that aren't necessarily in her control.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll touch on that later in the plot too, but you're 100% right. So after the dramatic apology, we have a PA announcement from all of the leaders of the town. So that's Sheriff Keller, Principal Weatherby, and Cheryl Blossom. And they team up to make this completely unhinged announcement about to the entire school about the investigation into Jason's death. And basically, like, we're looking for the killer. Heads up, school. We're going to be involving you kids in all of this. And after this announcement, Jughead recalls that he and Archie were supposed to go on a road trip together over the 4th of July, and Archie bailed at the last minute. So the gears are starting to turn. Jughead asks, "Is there something you want to tell me, pal?" And then we have the title card at 10 minutes and 3 seconds. So it's barely a drink, but it is a drink. We just made it. So that's very
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. We'll get to that in the rules section, but yeah, that surprised me too.
Yeah, it was a good one. So next we're in science class and we see that Cheryl's having a really hard time with the whole situation. We meet some NPC girls who are never named, who Cheryl describes as living mannequins, and they're questioning her about Jason. Then Archie asks to be her lab partner, only to also question her about Jason, but in like a more apologetic way because he feels so guilty. And Cheryl says that she's fine, everything's great, but they're dissecting frogs that day, and Cheryl just absolutely ruins the frog. So she's not doing great.
Yeah, she just
Uh,
stabs it aggressively with a what would you call that? Not
the
a syringe.
scalpel.
A scalpel, yeah.
Yeah, like anything. I mean, I've dissected a frog. I'm sure you have too. Any
I
little,
haven't
like,
dissected a frog actually. I dissected
really?
fetal pigs in high school.
Ugh. We
Yeah.
did frogs, we did little stuff like crayfish and stuff too. And we actually dissected a cat as well.
I don't like that.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was not great.
That's a lot of
Uh
dissecting.
yeah, well I took like AP anatomy.
Oh, that
I
explains it.
didn't mean to. It was a whole thing. I had signed up for AP environmental science and they didn't run it because not enough kids signed up.
Mhm.
And what the listener may not know is that I am terrible at math and science.
Mm.
And like environmental science, I felt like I could handle. AP anatomy was not for me, but they just like stuck me in it because not enough kids signed up for environmental science. And then I couldn't get out of it. And then I had to dissect a cat and it was horrible.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds. I wouldn't be. I'm not the most squeamish person in the world, but there's something about dissecting a cat that I don't love the idea of.
Yeah. I'll spare you the details, but it was not great. And it definitely did not go like Cheryl just like running her scalpel through this entire frog in one go. Like that's
Yeah.
you're just gonna have to get a new frog after that.
You're an expert on dissecting things. We've learned today, so
Yeah,
you would
yeah,
know.
my hidden talent. Yeah, it really helped me when I went to college to study theater too. So, also in this lab, we have Moose and Kevin as lab partners. And this is some more not great, like high school BS behavior, where throughout the episode, we see Moose wanting to pursue something more serious with Kevin and like asking him if he wants to see him again, all this stuff. But it is complicated because Moose, until this point, has been in the closet and he does have a girlfriend named Midge. So that's a whole situation. And it's understandable that Kevin maybe wouldn't want to get mixed up in all of that. But he spends the entire episode complaining that basically Moose needs to stay in the closet because that's what's more convenient for him. And don't love that, Kevin. And for being the token gay character, actually think that Kevin is pretty homophobic.
Yeah, Kevin's not great as a gay represent. Yeah, he's not great gay representation in this show.
No,
He's a little too like playing into stereotypes and at times, and I don't know. He has his
right.
moments, don't get me wrong, but he
No, he has
also
his
has,
moments. I mean, we'll have Kevin sploosh at some point,
yeah,
maybe, allegedly. But, like, yeah, Kevin is not it for me in these early episodes.
yeah.
So, meanwhile, we've got some more high school drama going on because Betty is just bubbling up. She's not able to bottle up that she still has feelings for Archie. She ends up bursting into tears when he plays music for them at lunch. And then later at Vixen's practice, she ends up picking a fight with Veronica about Archie. And, Veronica, again, being my low key favorite character in these early episodes, she's spitting some truths that Betty does not want to hear. Basically, she's saying that, like, she sympathizes with Betty, but it's not her fault or even Archie's fault that Archie doesn't feel the same way. And, like, fair. That's 100% true. But Betty can't hear that right now. And basically, she responds by giving the Manny Petty voucher from Veronica's apology to Cheryl instead. And then
I think this
meanwhile,
is, oh, sorry, do you want to continue?
no, 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 go ahead.
But I think that there's something about this that is like in some ways incredibly authentic about this show so far. Like a lot of other high school shows would have a more aggressive will they won't they for
Mm-hmm.
the entire season, and this show kind of just like Betty reacts in a way that's like very reasonable, like that, and understandable that she's like upset that this boy she likes doesn't like her back, and Veronica is handling it in a pretty mature way, I think, where she's like, and is being a good friend, I think, by saying this to her because
Yeah.
it's something she needs to hear.
Yeah. It's just crazy that, like, the main plot right now is actual high school drama that a real high school student would experience.
Oh yeah,
It's not going to be like
not
this for long, but
no,
you got to
it will
embrace
turn
it.
in. This will be a completely different show in about 10 episodes, but for now,
But it's so nice for now.
yeah.
So Archie's got some of his own high school drama, as we know. Back in Archie world, he's being questioned by Principal Weatherby about Jason Blossom's murder because Principal Weatherby says that Archie didn't make enough eye contact with him in the hallway, which I don't know. You went to prep school, so maybe that seems normal to you. That seems really weird to me. But Archie
I
realizes
thought
he.
he said sorry, I interrupted you. I
Oh,
thought
go
he said
ahead.
he like averted, he like, he like
Yeah, he like averted
averted
his
his
gaze or
like
something.
it was a more like overtly guilty thing to do. Like,
But, like, what are
uh,
you talking about? My high school principal probably didn't even know my name, let alone, like, the level of eye contact I was willing to make. Like, that's weird.
I mean, my high school principal was likely on the spectrum, so I think he was trying not to make eye contact. You probably struggled
Honestly,
with eye contact. I'm it sounds like I'm joking, I'm being completely serious.
yeah, who would want to make eye contact with like a bunch of high school students though? Not me. Like, why are you
Yeah.
so eager, Principal Weatherby? I don't know. So after this weird conversation, Archie confronts Grundy again. And at this point, he asks if her feelings are even genuine and, like, basically, what is the point of him putting himself through all this grief about the lie if she doesn't even have genuine feelings for him. And of course, because Grundy is this manipulator, she says, "Of course, my feelings for you are genuine." And she starts turning up like the level of affection because she's trying to get Archie to behave the way she wants. And so they start canoodling in the music room, and Jughead looks in the window and sees them because they are recklessly canoodling in the middle of the school. And thank goodness that Jughead sees this because he can finally talk to Archie about it, which is great. So after school, Jughead confronts Archie and says he saw him with Miss Grundy, finally gets Archie to confess about the whole thing, the Jason Blossom of it all, everything. But Archie gets very defensive during this conversation, and he actually threatens Jughead, saying that he can't tell anyone. And Jughead calls Archie out and says that he's not acting like himself, which he, even though we've only known Archie during the Miss Grundy times, we can tell that this is like not his usual character. And Jughead, as his like historical best friend, is able to call him out in a really nice way. Later, Archie sort of sneakily asks his dad for advice by saying that he and Jughead are fighting about a girl. And Fred advises Archie basically to just do what he knows is the right thing. So Fred does manage to give Archie some pretty solid advice, but Archie is still like really withholding 99% of the situation. But
Fred's such
Fred
a good dad.
Fred is such a good dad, and he's like also kind of sexy.
Yeah. No, the dads in the show. This show is peak dad.
Oh my god, we haven't even met Jughead's sexy dad yet.
No, no, no. The show knows how to cast a dad.
They sure
Let's leave it
do.
at that.
Yeah, not all the dads are sexy, but the dads who are sexy, whew, it's giving Charlie Swan vibes. So at Betty's house, it seems like she and Cheryl are having this like nice little girls' day. They had their mani pedis. Cheryl's giving her a makeover, but internally Cheryl is on the verge of a mental breakdown. And so she's like applying Betty's makeup and they're having this nice little conversation. And then it slowly turns into Cheryl grilling Betty about Polly. And it ends with Cheryl calling Betty a fat cow and accusing Polly of murdering Jason, which the progression of this conversation, I mean, as a former actor, director myself, what an absolute fucking delight. Like, it's so subtle how the shift in the conversation happens. And it's like you just blink and then suddenly Betty's a fat cow and Polly's a murderer. Like, how did we even get here? It's so great. And Madeline Petch does such a great job with this scene. And I think that this kind of stuff is why they give Cheryl so much to do as the show goes on. It's like
Yeah.
really horrifying and delightful.
Cheryl's sort of a antagonist slash side character in much of the first season, and pretty shortly after thereafter, she will become basically a part of the main cast, along with
Yeah.
the main four: Archie, Jughead, Veronica, Betty, and yeah, she's great, and it's like a quintessential Cheryl scene, one of many, and
And it's also a very important Betty scene
mhm,
because after this accusation at Polly, Betty sees red, and we get our very first little glimpse of Dark Betty, the best and
spoilers,
most important character on this show.
spoilers, Meredith,
But it's
spoilers.
here. Like, we're getting that
Uh,
glimpse. And Betty fully threatens to kill Cheryl if she doesn't get out
Mhm.
of her house. And you can see she means it. This isn't like a, oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to kill you. This is an actual murder threat.
Yes, and there is a Lily Reinhart does a great job playing that sort of like sudden like like shift and like iron resolve that Betty suddenly like displays about how intensely she's she means what she's saying. And it's I think it's part of the whole like Betty is a sort of character who is very repressed due to her
Mm-hmm.
upbringing and the bad example, quote unquote bad example, her sister set in and why her sister isn't around and how her parents are maybe like overcompensating for that to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so fascinating to see that first little glimpse because up until now she's appeared as this perfectly polished, pristine overachiever, type A girl, always in pink, perfect tight ponytail, the whole thing. And this is our first glimpse that there's also a darkness to her
Hmm.
and a side that maybe you weren't expecting for the first episode and a half.
Absolutely.
And it's very exciting. So, next, it's the day of the big game because it's Riverdale High. And of course, there's a big game. And all of the main characters are hanging out in this weird, like, school lounge room that isn't really clear, like, what kind of room it is or what it's there for, but we're going to see it a lot over the next 7 seasons of this show. So, I'm just going to call it the school lounge. And Reggie, the whole football team's there, including Reggie, and he picks a fight with Jughead. And he basically accuses him of being Jason Blossom's killer and doing stuff with Jason's body. He throws out a lot of weird references and calls him Donnie Darko and all this other stuff. And so, yeah, he accuses him of quote unquote doing stuff with Jason's body. And Jughead says, and I have to call out this line because it is the only time this episode actually made me laugh out loud. He says, "It's called necrophilia. Can you spell it?" And like, iconic. And Jughead has so many great lines throughout this episode. Like, there's so too many to call out in just this, but like, that one literally made me laugh out loud. It was so great. And Betty, during all of this, also finds a time to apologize to Veronica. She admits that Veronica was right and that she's just struggling with the Archie situation, her crazy mom, and what's happening to Polly. So, yeah, like typical high school drama.
Good scene that sort of establishes the dynamics of the high school and the hierarchy to some extent, and Jason's relationship to the school in general, with Reggie being a dick and going after Jughead, who's definitely established as sort of an outsider.
Yeah, I also think it's very typical high school that, like, even though there is a murder, which is not typical for most kids' lives, I think it's very typical that all of the kids are using the murder as a way to bully each other and saying like, "Well, I think you're the murderer because you're weird." And I think you're the murderer because you're too popular, or you were like friends with him or whatever. Like that feels very true to how teenagers would actually react to this situation.
Yeah, I mean the it's called necrophilia line is in some ways a little too well written for a high schooler, but at the same time it's also like totally like something that the awkward kid in school would say as a comeback when he's getting bullied. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like you're just an idiot. Like, what are you talking about? And
Are you kidding
yeah,
me? That is
it feels
exactly
very
what the
genuine.
kid who reads too much JD Salinger would say.
100%.
Yeah, it feels very true to me.
How can you read too
So,
much J.D. Salinger? Doesn't he only have like one book?
yeah, and
Or did
we
you know
went to
he
high
said he made
school
two?
we went to high school with kids who read that one book far too many times and
Oh, I was
identified with
that
it
kid.
way too closely.
Oh, I
You
was
were
that
that
kid and
kid?
heard it. I loved Catcher in the Rye.
I
I
didn't know
was like,
that about you.
yeah.
I would have judged you so
Well,
hard.
I think it was before high school, if we're being honest, but probably when I was like 13, 14. Probably it's before I knew you, probably at least.
Yeah.
I read it and I was like, man, phonies, they suck. Who
Those
likes a phony?
phonies.
Who likes a phony?
I thought that book was so pretentious in high school, but I think it's because I don't think I read it until maybe like 10th grade. And by that point, I associated it with all of like the Jughead type of boys in my life. And I was like, this is so
Hmm.
pretentious.
This is very telling about me too, and why I love a show like Riverdale. But I do love I love a book about, set at a high school in the like 1950s. Oh boy, what a great mood.
Would you say, of all the characters in this show, do you think you identify the most with Jughead?
Probably, probably inadvertently. I don't identify with Archie probably at all.
No.
But yeah, probably inadvertently Jughead.
I
Definitely in
wish
high
I
school
identified
Jughead.
with Archie.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't want to? Yeah, I see you as a
Everyone wants to
Jughead.
be the hot guy who everyone, including every adult you ever meet, is obsessed with. A beautiful idiot.
Oh my god, to live that life. If only I could be that beautiful and that stupid.
Yeah, it'd be
It's
great.
the key to happiness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, speaking of beautiful himbos, we are back to sports. It's finally the pep rally at the big game, and Archie finds Jughead to apologize. Jughead, it's actually shocking to me that Jughead is at the game, and I think that's really sweet because probably supporting Archie's first varsity game is the only reason he even went. And like, even though they're on the outs, he still showed up and he's like leaning against the bleachers in a very emo way.
Well,
And
he is
I think
like
that's very sweet.
beside or underneath the bleachers, which I feel like is a very outsider thing to do
Oh,
in
yes.
a high school thing, to be below, not like actually like part of the crowd, like kind of
No, he's like
away from it.
separate. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, he's like separate because he's different. And they have this very sweet, like genuine moment. And I don't know, maybe it's because of how much Riverdale we've watched and feeling very like sentimental and nostalgic about it in a way. But this episode had a lot of really sweet moments like this that just made me go like, oh, like this show. And this was one of them. It really touched my heart, actually. Um, but basically they make up. It's very cute. And Jughead says, why don't we just do that bro thing where we nod like douches and wow, why can't I say douches? And just nod like douches and just mutually suppress our emotions. And yeah, that is normally what they would do. But Jughead's different. He's special. And so they hug it out. It's really cute. And after making things right with Jughead, Archie does live up to his promise to Jughead by finding Miss Grundy and warning her that he plans to come clean to Principal Weatherby about the entire thing. And then it's finally time for the pep rally and the game to get started. Josie and the Pussycats perform Sugar Sugar, which is one of the songs from the band The Archies in the 60s. So that's really fun. And the River Vixens dance. And this is a huge moment for Cheryl because basically this whole episode, it's been her goal to make it through this dance and avoid having a mental breakdown in front of the entire town. She does it. She's on stage with the Vixens. Everything's going great. And then the football team runs out and Archie comes out with the team. He's wearing Jason's number 9, and he has the exact same shade of red hair and looks exactly like Jason. Is that why he got Jason's number in the first place? I can't help but wonder. But either way, it's not great for Cheryl. So she does end up running off in tears. And Veronica runs off to find her and comforts her in the locker room. And Betty finds them and just kind of like stalks in the background and watches the scene go down. And finally, she realizes that maybe she had Veronica all wrong and that she is a genuine person who wants to turn a new leaf. And Betty's like really impressed by how Veronica handles the situation with Cheryl. So finally, we're getting somewhere with that friendship.
Yeah. I genuinely laughed out loud when they cut to Cheryl imagining Archie as Jason because
Why?
the way they like, if you go back and watch it, the way like Jason's head is like it's like cut and pasted onto Archie's body. It's not
Yeah,
like
it is weird.
they didn't actually just like refilm it with the actor who plays Jason. They just like lazily photoshopped his head onto Archie's body. And I saw it and I laughed, and I also laughed at Cheryl running just like there's like a shot of Cheryl just
Oh,
running
she runs
across
the
an
entire
empty
length of the
y-
field.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just like really long of her running, and I thought that I don't know why I thought the framing it that way was really funny because it just felt like I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like there's some movie or something where someone just like there's like way too long of a shot of someone running away, some comedy, probably some Adam Sandler movie or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
It is an
So,
excessively long shot. And yeah, the Photoshop is weird. Maybe this is my moment to share my weird fun fact about all of the red hair in Riverdale, which
mhm.
is so Madeline Petch, who plays Cheryl, that is her actual, like, real hair color. And the way they got it all to look so stylized is that all of the actors who aren't Cheryl, who have red hair, had to dye their hair to match Madeline Petch's natural shade so that they all have like this uniform color of red hair. And I think that is so interesting and weird because they don't just do it with the Blossoms, they also did it for Archie. And it drove me crazy the first few seasons of the show because I kept thinking that Archie would turn out to be like secretly a Blossom or something. And I don't think this is a spoiler because that is absolutely not what happens on this show. But I kept thinking it was going to happen because his hair is exactly the same shade. But it turns out it's just because it's her natural shade.
This is just occurring to me now, but maybe it was a choice because it's supposed to look comic booky, like
I think that was the vibe.
where you're dealing with a limited color palette. I would think in principle, if you're like coloring a comic book, like Archie, like the old Archie comics, and it'd be like, okay, you get like one red for all the hair, and that's just the hair red that you use. So everyone's red hair is the same.
Yeah, I think that's the vibe. I haven't seen anything to confirm this theory, but I've kind of wondered at times if they did the same thing with Jughead and Veronica because Cole Sprouse is naturally blonde, so obviously they were going to have to dye his hair brown, but like they dye him this really dark like raven brown and he probably would have looked better in more of like a brunette, but like I have wondered before if they took him that dark to match Camila Mendez's hair color.
To me, that's like comic booky. Like actually, now that you're
Yeah.
mentioning it, like the way Jughead's hair is like so high contrast with his skin is a little bit comic booky to me.
Yeah, totally. So, that's very fun.
Hmm.
And actually, the hair colors are important in the next scene too, because we get another really sweet, just like heartwarming scene where, a single little tear welled up in my eye, which is after the game, Betty and Veronica have made up and they decide to go to Pops for a burger and a milkshake. And this is very important. Betty always gets a vanilla milkshake. And Veronica always gets a chocolate milkshake. Why? Because Betty has blonde hair and Veronica has brown hair. And your milkshake must match the color of your hair. And they have this really sweet scene. They agree to never fight about a boy again. And then Archie and Jughead walk in and they ask to join them. They all sit down together. And this is the very first time that we get the core four all together in their booth at Pops and all with milkshakes that match their hair. And in case you're wondering about redheads, they get a pink strawberry milkshake. And it's just like this is the moment. It's the core four. And I did have a little tear. I mean, I cry at like anything. I'm a Cancer moon. I know you understand because you're a Cancer sun. But yeah, it was very sweet.
No, yeah, it definitely got to me. I like the way Jughead sort of like jumps over the back of the booth to get
Yeah.
instead of making Veronica slide over. And yeah, it's interesting. Also, Jughead's voiceover at this point is interesting because
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of incongruous with the direction the show will eventually go in, which we'll get to. But I think it's worth like like making a mental note of like his voiceover about how it's like Archie. It's like really three people sitting there. It's like Jughead's like there, but he talks about himself as like almost this like dispassionate observer, and then
Yeah.
it's like Archie and these two women who are like all sort of have feelings for each other or something, and Archie's like
Yeah, he
doing
like
great
doesn't
because
realize
of
that
it.
he's the luckiest boy in the world is basically
Yeah,
what
something
he
like that. Yeah.
says. But yeah, it is interesting how he disassociates himself from that
Hmm.
moment. And I think a lot of that leans to, so in the comics, Jughead is Ace.
Yeah.
And that's
Or
not
he's
how they're,
coded as Ace.
yeah. And that's not how they're going to handle Jughead in the show. But I know
Mhm.
that Cole Sprouse really pushed for that when they were developing the character. And I did wonder if this was like one little bit of that that kind of remained.
Yeah, like they hadn't decided fully yet,
Yeah, because
two
he's
episodes in.
very much part of the foursome, but very much removed from the love triangle that's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very sweet and I loved it. And then we wrap up the episode the next morning, which Archie goes to make good on his promise to Jughead to confess. He walks into the principal's office, but he is too late because the police are there. And in the middle of science class, Cheryl Blossom is arrested. She says that she's guilty of what we will not learn this episode. And we learn that the autopsy revealed that Jason died over a week after he went missing on the 4th of July. And that's the
Yeah.
end of the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The episode is definitely a lot of like table setting, uh, a lot of getting you maybe like getting a feel for what the rhythm of the show is going to be like for a little while. Um, and getting used to the dynamics of the main characters. But
Yeah, I
a good
loved this
second episode.
episode. It did a really good
Yeah.
job of like more of setting the stage for the rest of the season, but also like the high school drama. We haven't gotten to this line yet, but it really showed to me, the highs and lows of high school football in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. And I think it was like comfort food in a weird way. Like it just like it like when you spend as much time with the show as we have is it's just very like it's like a good episode that's just like like just giving you all the things you love about the show sort of in a tight 45-minute block. Like there's not too much craziness, but it's also just a lot of good moments with all the characters you like.
Yeah, there's a lot of good character development for everyone. And this episode really, for me, developed and established the core four
Hmm.
friendship in a really beautiful way. Like, there's sort of there's the will they, won't they between Betty and Archie, of course, but there's also the will they, won't they between Archie and Jughead and Betty and Veronica of like, are they going to repair these friendships? Is this going to
Hmm.
be like a long term best friend situation, or are they going to fall out in this episode? And
Hmm.
to see the four of them all come together as a unit at the end is really rewarding. And
Hmm.
uh, yeah, really sets the tone nicely for a beautiful friendship over the next 7 seasons of Riverdale.
Yep.
So I think with that, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll do the drinking game.
Sounds good. If the congregation could please open their rule hymnals to him 2, verse 2. So this week's refrain, the list of rules that were triggered in this episode, the first rule triggered is Rule 35, and the mortician has a scene. Now, this rule we made, I think, into season 2 or 3, and this is actually a different mortician than we had in mind when we made the rule.
Wait, but I literally did not realize that this was a different person. I mean, I could tell that it was like a. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a
So
character who will be recast as a different actor after this season. So I guess in my mind, I was thinking maybe
he's
they
not
just
recast.
recast this guy, but this is a different
Yeah.
character.
It's a different character. Yeah. So they have a similar energy. I'll give you that. So,
Well, and that
so
energy is creepy plus weird.
yeah. So this is if I'm
Oh,
remembering
and takes
correctly, they're
bribes.
yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, they're not recast. So this is Doctor our first time seeing Dr. Curdle, who is a minor character but a great character who we see uh in the intro with Jason's body, and then we see him again a second time, so it's triggered a second time at 12:30 in an autopsy scene. The next, he's very creepy, and Alice bribes him to get information on Jason's death that she can write about in the newspaper, I believe.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is like weird because there's only one mortician in town as far as we know. So like where do they think she's getting this information?
I mean, I guess he could just deny it.
But
She could
there's
just
no
claim to have.
confidentiality. Like how would she
You're
possibly
right.
know that?
It would be pretty easy to figure out if he was taking bribes.
But he does take bribes in small bills.
Yeah, yeah. Were they small bills? I didn't notice. Did he
Yeah, that
say
was a
that
line that
specifically?
that Alice said. She's like, "Here, small bills like you asked for."
I guess that makes sense. If you're, it's hard to break a lot of places won't take like 100 or something.
Yeah.
Um, and in a small town, if you go to the bank and you ask for like, I don't know, like 3 grand in $100 bills or five,
But also, like, it's so obvious she might as well have just written him a check, like, from Alice Cooper.
true. Do you take Venmo? Just write
But wait, it would have been, in this
autopsy
show, it would
bribe.
have been weird off brand Venmo. It would have been like, oh, do you take Ven Go?
Well, we'll see. That's not true. They do have weird product placement down the road. So the next rule triggered is Archie shirtless. We only get one in this episode
But it's
when
a
he
good
wakes up.
one.
Yeah, he wakes up in bed with a guilty heart at in during the intro at 1:30.
Have
Then
you
we
ever woken
have
up in the middle of the night and run shirtless to your girlfriend's house, even if it was an age appropriate girlfriend?
no, not
Me
shirtless.
neither. It's not very
Then
relatable.
yeah, not relatable. You think it might be cold or something too. They are in upstate New York
Yeah, it's presumably
in the fall.
September.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least. Yeah. Um, Rule 7 is an adult finds Archie attractive. We have 2 instances of this in the intro. We have a flashback. We hit a lot. We had like 3 rules in like a less than 30-second window in the intro. We have a flashback to
Wow.
Archie kissing Grundy on the 4th of July. And then we have more at 1640. All I have written down is more Grundy statutory rape. I think it's them canoodling in the classroom.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
I did Rule 12 Kevin Sploosh because of the line at 6:20 that Kevin isn't 100% sure that Archie is straight because no straight man has that body.
That
Um,
was Kevin Sploosh. I still don't know
that
what Kevin Sploosh means, but I know that it's that.
yeah, it's like if the Supreme Court had to define it, they couldn't, but they know it when they see it. Um,
Oh my god.
maybe that's our criteria for Kevin Sploosh. We can't define it, but we know it when we see it.
I mean, hey, if it works for the Supreme Court, surely it's official enough for this drinking game.
Absolutely. Uh, Next, we have character makes a pop culture reference that makes you say, "What the fuck?"
Oh, there
Uh,
were several of these.
oh yeah, this was by far the most active rule in this episode. We have four. Cheryl says during when they announce just before the title card that they're gonna do an investigation on the killer and be looking for people at the high school or whatever. And Cheryl says, and his cold-hearted killer is walking the Green Mile to sit old Sparky and Fry, which is a reference to the Green Mile, but it was weird to say it over a PA in a high school.
Yeah, that was weird. I also wondered about, I don't know if this is one of the ones you wrote, but after that, she says hashtag Riverdale strong. And I couldn't decide if that was a Live Strong reference or not.
Oh,
But
good
maybe
point.
Live Strong is too old, but also, like, maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe that could be one. Maybe I missed that one. If other
I mean,
listeners
hey,
out
if
there,
you know it when you see it.
yeah. Uh, at 1350, we have Kevin says he's handsome in a pre-accident Montgomery Clift way, which I had to look up, but it's apparently an actor who died in an accident. I don't, do you know, have you heard of this person?
No.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
other
thought it
than
was a,
from Kevin. So that's
yeah,
truly a what the fuck.
that's truly what the fuck, in that I was mostly just confused by what he was saying. It was such a deep cut. Then we have Reggie says,
Wait, who is Montgomery Cliff?
You'd have to Google. I've honestly forgotten since I looked it up, but
Okay, great.
he was an actor. He was probably like active like in the 50s or 60s. Like he is a like probably like kind of an almost James Dean type character or something.
Okay.
Um, and then we have at 30 minutes, Reggie says, "What was it like, Suicide Squad?" when he's accusing Jughead of killing Jason, which I don't really
Yeah.
understand what that means, but the Suicide Squad is a comic book about supervillains who were arrested and work for the government now. Uh,
I kind of feel like maybe, I mean, obviously we're not adjusting the drinking game at this stage, but I feel like maybe we should have made it a double drink if it's a reference to a different comic book IP.
ooh, that's interesting. We could start adding rules again.
We can.
Uh, and the final one for this episode was Reggie, did you and Donnie Darko kill him together? So we got the Donnie Darko reference there, which was definitely strange and felt out of place accusing someone of murder.
Yeah.
Um, the next drinking, Reggie does a lot of these, I think. I think we've had a few from Reggie so far. And then the next rule is finish your drink when the title card shows up 10 minutes or later into the episode. Now, you said it was at 10:03. I clocked it at 10 minutes even.
Oh, well, you know what? I hit pause like after the full title card was
Mhm.
appearing. So maybe it was like 10 minute to 10:03.
Yeah, I clocked 10 even. I went back and I checked, and I'm pretty sure it's 10 even.
Either
We have
way, whoa. It's always like more rewarding when you just make it by the skin of your teeth.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. We hadn't made this rule yet when we watched this episode, so this was shocking. And then finally, we have, or not finally, we have Archie acknowledges football or music. There was only one in this when he plays the song on his guitar that Betty breaks down to. Other than that, I don't think he talks much about football other than showing up at the game. I didn't he get Jason's old number in the previous episode, I think? Or
Yeah,
was
that
it this
was
episode?
episode 1.
Yeah. And then there might have maybe if you're playing more liberally, you could sneak one or two more in because he is at a football game in uniform.
You
Um,
know, does he actually talk about music in this episode either? Because he plays
he
music
plays it.
at lunch,
Yeah.
but he's like asked to. He doesn't
Well, the
like
rule
talk
is
about music.
acknowledges. He just has to acknowledge that football
Mm,
or music exists. So, but I'm not sure
okay.
if he acknowledges football at the football game, other than being in uniform.
No, he's in the uniform and he runs, but we don't see him like play the game. Like we don't know confirmed did Archie play football that night.
Hmm. And then finally, Rule 13, a cover of a song, diegetic or non-diegetic. We have Josie and the Pussycats covering Sugar Sugar by the Archies, which
That
is,
was
as you
really fun.
mentioned. Yeah, I thought it was actually a pretty good cover too.
I thought so too. It's fun as the show goes on, the songs that they'll cover will get more and more unhinged and like not related to the show. And I think it's really fun that they're covering the Archies because like why wouldn't they?
Yeah, and yeah, that's actually like a really popular song that I didn't realize was created by like a band that sort of was like, I mean, I guess real people were in it, but it was like semi-fictional in that they were supposed to be portraying characters from a comic book.
Yeah.
And so that's all the drinking rules today. So for the verse of this hymn, I figured we would focus on. I went back and forth on this one. There were a couple rules that I thought could be in this episode. It was, and there are other ones. There are other episodes I think down the road that will be stronger episodes for discussing those rules. So I figured this was a good one to talk about. Finish your drink when the title card shows up 10 minutes
Mm.
or later into the episode. Do you have any thoughts on this rule, Meredith?
Yeah, so originally this rule when we first made it, we set it at 15.
Hmm.
And I think when we made the rule, we had just passed an episode or two where it was 15 minutes in. And like, so how we watched this show the first time is we would binge it.
Hmm.
So we would
In
take
like
like an
4 or 5 episode chunks.
yeah, so we would take like an entire Saturday. We would get our beer or whatever. We'd usually be at my house and we would like hunker down and watch, yeah, like 4 or 5 episodes of this show all in one go. And when you're watching that many episodes, they do just kind of like bleed together.
And
And
I would add to that point, they bleed together in a weird way because the show has the title card usually about 10 to 15 minutes. So, I would say usually about 5 to 15 minutes into the episode, and again at the end of the episode. So
yes,
we
so
would often get
sometimes
confused.
yeah, we would see the title card and we wouldn't know if we were at the beginning of an episode or the end of an episode. So that's why we started pausing it and looking at the timestamp to figure out, like, it was more of navigational than anything else. So we then we started realizing how far we were into the episode because we were like, wow, we thought we watched an entire television of or we thought we watched an entire episode of television and it's only been 10-15 minutes, but it's weird that they're waiting this long to show the title card like every time. And yes, some of them are as early as like 5 minutes, but it did become really exciting to see like how long they were going to wait to do the title card. And I'm glad we moved it to 10 minutes because I think it's more achievable for the game, but it's still infrequent enough that you're not going to die.
Yeah, we're 2 for 2, but this will become increasingly rare. There's a lot of like 8 to 9 minute episodes out
Yeah,
there.
like sometimes you'll get to like 9
Mhm.
minutes and 55 seconds and it's like, no.
But like the first episode, they did a lot of episode, 13 minutes, 42 seconds in. There were like multiple scenes. I think on your summary for that one, you were like a full page in, and then it was like title card. And
Yeah.
it surprised me even there, which is like sort of why we made it a rule because it was often kind of shocking and it would catch you off guard and you'd be like, ah, shoot,
Yeah, and
they got us.
the one time that it is, and I don't think this ever actually happened to us, but if it does coincidentally happen to you listeners, I'm sorry. But like if you're just sitting down to watch the show and then the very first episode you watch has like an 11-minute title card and you've like just poured yourself a new drink, like I'm sorry. But for us,
Them's
it
the rules.
usually didn't work out that way. Like, usually it would be like the third or fourth episode that we watched in a day, and we'd be like, oh, okay, we're like at the bottom of our drink anyway. And then we'd finish that drink and go get a new one. Like, I don't think it ever happened that we had to like drink an entire drink because of that particular finish your drink. But that was more from like sheer dumb luck than anything else.
Yeah, it was pretty rare that we would be caught with our pants down like that. So,
Yeah,
um,
but it is a fun one. And
Yeah, it's a fun
it's
one.
one, you got to pause it every episode just to check. Like, it's fun
Yeah,
to check.
and it's something to check every episode, which I think we thought was fun about that.
Yeah,
And the title card becomes weirdly important down the road. We'll discuss it later, but like it ends up having this like strange significance in the later seasons
that's
uh
true.
to the show itself, where all of a sudden you're like, what's this about? Yeah, so that's rule 20 dash 21 dash 1 slash rule 90 because because rule 90 was the revision of
When we changed
the
it from
original
15
rule
to 10
to 10.
minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have 106 rules anyway, so a couple doubles in there. So
There
that's
are
why
a
it's
couple
21
doubles.
that's why it's
But
21
there's
dash 1
also a
because they're
couple where like we like skipped a number, or like there's all kinds of weird stuff going on there.
Mhm, true. Yeah. All right, Meredith. And with that, it's time for the moment of truth every week where we decide if this episode was Riverdale or Liver Fail. What do you think
Hmm.
based on the rules we did?
You know, I yes, there was a finish or drink in this episode. However, having just heard you describe all the rules, I think this one was on the tamer side. And I'm going to say this was just Riverdale.
I'm gonna agree that it's Riverdale. Counted, um, I counted 11 rules and one finish your drink in this episode. 11 drinks and one finish your drink.
11
So,
like
and
sips and then one finish or drink.
and to the finish your drink point, a lot, like a good half of those drinks happen before the title card. So the finish your drink is maybe less devastating because, as I said, you've got three drinks by like 1:45, a minute 45 into this episode.
Yeah, so it's a heavy start, but
hmm
then you've got the whole rest of the episode to sober up.
The middle kind of drags. I think there's a couple at the end, but yeah, the middle, you're gonna get through like a beer and a half in this episode, probably.
Yeah, so this is just Riverdale.
Yeah, just a normal episode of Riverdale where you drink a beer
Yeah.
and a half.
That's still a lot of beer. Oh, man. We're gonna die. No, we lived the first time.
Yeah.
We'll live again.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, with that, Joe, is there anything else you've got going on this week? Anything you want to share before we start to wrap up?
Gonna go watch the Eagles, go Birds.
Go Birds.
Uh, gonna go watch them hopefully beat the Atlanta Falcons. And later this week I'm going to my brother's bachelor party.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that'll be good. And how about you?
I'm going to Portugal on Friday.
Ooh,
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow is my first wedding anniversary with my husband, and we're going to take a little
congratulations.
trip. Thank
You made it
you.
a year.
We made it a year. We were together like for almost a decade before we got married, so we really weren't sure if we were going to make it to this 1 year mark.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it was really shocking and surprising to everyone, but
only
here
4
we
or
are.
5, maybe 6 more decades to go.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Yeah.
No, it's been really great, and we're very excited to celebrate and do something together, and that'll be
You're
fun.
really in season 2 of your relationship right now.
It's giving season 2. It's giving character
Which
development.
strong season. Strong season.
Oh man. And yeah, we'll have to have a new mystery in town, and some characters will be recast.
Yeah. Hopefully I don't get recast.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what
If
will
I
roll
sound
into town in
completely
season
different,
2.
if I sound completely different next week, dear listener, that's why. Meredith
Yeah.
recast me.
Yeah, I'm gonna replace you with who would I cast as you? That's something to think about between this week and next. Who
hmm
will I hire to be the new Joe?
True.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, with that, I think you all survived. Thank you so much for tuning in to Riverdale, the Drinking Game, the podcast. For next time, please add the following rules to your rule hymnal. Rule 93, title card appears less than 5 minutes into an episode. Rule 20, every time Betty calls someone an unnecessary nickname, i.e. Arch and Jug. Rule 40, anytime someone insinuates Riverdale is an idyllic place to live. Rule 29, Maple is associated with something sexual. Rule 18, dramatic Kate moment. Rule 3, appearance from Dark Betty. Rule 85, someone drinks a milkshake flavor that does not match their hair color. Rule 6, every time Joe gets offended that the Blossom Maple Syrup Empire is located in New York. And Rule 66, Blossom Arson. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and by then, we'll have latched onto some other girl to destroy.
Bye.